Hello everyone, my name is Heather and welcome to the channel Bookables. Today I'm here to share with you all of the books I read in the month of June. This month I read 7 books. I'm kind of on my track to read anywhere from 6 to 8. These past few months I've been reading 8, so I was kind of disappointed at the end of the month. I was like, oh, I've only read 7, but nevertheless, there's a lot of books on this that I really love, so I feel like overall it was a pretty good month. I don't know, with my wrap-ups, I always start off with my least favorite book that I read that month, working up to my favorite. I have a lot that I really love, but I have a couple that I kind of could have done without, honestly. And the first one being Business or Pleasure by Rachel Lynn Solomon. If you don't know, Rachel Lynn Solomon is one of the authors, I feel like, especially over the past few years, a lot of young adult authors, contemporary authors more particularly, have made kind of the jump into the pond of adult romance, and I've really enjoyed that transition, such as Emily Henry, Emily Wibberley, and also Siba Broca, Rachel Lynn Solomon. I'm sure I'm missing another one. Rachel Lynn Solomon is one of those authors, and I have to say, I really only loved one of her adult romances. The other ones I could have, I don't know, and this one's included. So this one, I love the covers of them all the way. Her covers, A+. So this one has an interesting premise. This one's all about a character named Chandler who is a ghostwriter. If you don't know what a ghostwriter is, they're used a lot for memoirs, maybe other books, we don't know. But they pretty much write the book and they get paid and they don't, their name's not on it at all. Like, it's kind of ghost written. So at the beginning of the book, she has just finished writing this book for kind of like, imagine like a bachelorette type of girl that made her fame on The Bachelorette. Now she's kind of being a social media influencer. She decided to write a book, and Chandler wrote it. So she's attending the book launch of this book because she's like, maybe, you know, the author, when she signs my book, she'll be like, oh, Chandler, like, thank you for all you did. Only when she goes to get her book signed, the author has no idea who she is. Chandler's kind of commiserating in her misery, and she sits down at the bar and she meets this guy named Finn, and they kind of hit it off. They have a great night together, and then she's like, I'm never gonna see him again. It was like kind of like a one-night stand. Well, she gets her next assignment to ghostwrite a book for a actor that was on, like, kind of think Teen Wolf, and he wants to write like his own book, and she meets him, and who is it but Finn? And she's like, oh crap, because he gave her a fake name. She didn't really watch the show, so she didn't know who he was, and she ends up writing a book for him. And you know, they have to talk about the night that they shared, only she's like, you know, that night wasn't that great. And he's like, I thought like I fulfilled you. And she's like, no. And so with this book, she's writing a book about Finn, learning about his life. And also Finn's like, hey, can you like teach me like how to fulfill the ladies? Because I called my other girlfriends and they're like, yeah, you weren't really great in that department. So she kind of teaches him about that too. And it sounds really cool. It sounds like a great premise, a book I would love to read, but sadly the chemistry was not there. Finn and Chandler just didn't have a lot of chemistry. Like, there was a lot of steamy times in this book where she would tell him how to pleasure and do all these things, which I was interested in, but then I was like, I don't really vibe with this chemistry that well. So it made me really dislike the book, and just, I really had to push myself to finish this, honestly. So honestly, I would give it a 3 out of 5, kind of on the lower 3 end. I didn't love it, sadly. I don't know. I feel like the past couple Rachel Lynn Solomon books I've read in her adult romance, I don't love. So I might have to stick with just her YA contemporary. No, moving on to another romance, Flawless by Elsie Silver. I read this because I'm trying to dip my toe into the pool that is indie romance, and I have to say I enjoyed this. This one is about a bull rider named Rhett who has such a bad mouth. He was in the beginning of the book saying he hates milk and milk is horrible, and what do you know, he has a milk sponsorship. So of course they drop him, and his agent's like, you know what, I'm gonna assign you a babysitter, and it's gonna be my daughter Summer. And so she decides to tag along with him the next 2 months to his writing events and help him kind of gain his sponsors back. But of course you can guess where the plot is going, where they're going to be together. It's definitely like a cowboy type of romance, which I'm not really into, but I liked it. It wasn't like groundbreaker or anything. I did like the romance. It wasn't super amazing, so I gave it a 3.5 out of 5. I will definitely be continuing on with this series. I believe it's called the Chestnut Spring series. I'm not in any rush to do so, but it was an enjoyable time, and I will definitely read more of Elsie Silver's books. Next up, I have You Shouldn't Have Come Here by Geneva Rose. And I'm not gonna lie to you, what drew me to this book is the cover. Not only is it kind of very dark and ominous, it has a whole bunch of like scratches on it. I really enjoy it. So this book takes place from 2 points of views, Grace and Calvin. Grace is an overworked New Yorker, and she's like, I need to like just get out. And so she decides to just pick a random Airbnb in Wyoming. And what do you know? It's this lone ranch in the middle of nowhere, and Calvin owns it, and he is also staying there, which I'm just like, this is odd. Like, when you usually get an Airbnb, the host does not stay there. It just screams horror movie to me. And of course, when she gets there, about 50,000 red flags pop up that you're just like, why are you still here? Like, she gets there. The owner's still there. I think she knew that, maybe. I don't know. There's no Wi-Fi. There's no cell service. You know, she goes into town and people know her name, and she's never even, you know, said her name to them. There's a huge padlock on the basement door that's like, don't go down there. And I'm like, is this obvious, or is this like really obvious? Overall, I give this book a 3.5. It was definitely leaning towards more a 3 by the, it was definitely leaning more towards a 3, but the ending really got me. The ending was good. I was not expecting that plot twist, but it was a good plot twist. I will admit that. I was interested in that. What I think the main qualm of this for me was not even the many red flags, because I feel like horror movies, there's so many thousand red flags, and like, you know, the character runs back inside the house or goes up the stairs, and you're just like, but then again, when you have your dread on, you know, it makes it for a horror movie, okay? It wasn't even that. It was the writing style was a little bit too simplistic for me. I just felt kind of, I just didn't love the writing style. So it really kind of amped up this book for me was the ending, and how I don't think anybody would see it coming. Hands down, the best part of the book. But overall, I didn't love it. I would say if you're like a big thriller fan, maybe skip out on this one. If you like kind of isolated thrillers about maybe a relationship where they both don't seem like who they are, I'd maybe check this out. Like I said, the ending was the best part. That's all I'll say. Speaking of thrillers, I have Riley Sager's newest book, The Only One Left. If you don't know, Riley Sager is probably my favorite thriller author. I really enjoy his books. I did not like his last book, The Cabin Across the House Across the Lake, whatever it's called, that came out last year. I loathed it. So I was nervous going to this one, and I have to say, it was, I didn't love it, but I didn't loathe it nearly as much as some of his other books, if that makes any sense. Once again, I will say Riley Sager does great on the settings. Like, he writes a beautiful setting. It's kind of like Ruth Ware. Like, when I read her books, I can imagine I'm there. With Ruth Ware, the plot doesn't really match the setting for me, so that's why I kind of gave her up. But Riley Sager really does well with the plot matching the setting, so I've always interested in his books. So this book is about a character named Kit, and it takes place in the 80s, and she's like a nurse home health aide, and she got fired, and now she gets her job back, and she doesn't get to pick like her patient. She gets assigned to Lenora Hope, who lives on the edge of town in this like house on like a cliff, if you will. And legend has it that Lenora killed both her parents and her sister like back in 1929, and nobody's been ever really to figure out if she really has done it or not. But now Lenora is in her 80s and she needs home health. And not only that, but she can't talk at all. She can only communicate like using a keyboard, like using a typewriter and things like that. And so basically what happens is Kit goes there, she learns more about the secrets of these murders, if Lenora really did it or not. And one night Lenora's typing to her, it says, I think she says like, I want to tell you everything. And so she starts to tell her the story of what really happened that fateful night in the 20s. Did she really kill her parents and her sister? You know, who's to say? I will say this had a ton of plot twists in it. Some of them were very recognizable, like easy to see. And some of them I felt were not the best. So I would probably give this a 4 out of 5, like kind of in the lower 4 into 5. I didn't love it nearly as much as other books like Home Before Dark and Final Girls. Those are my 2 favorite Riley Sager books, but then again, I didn't loathe it nearly as much as The House Across the Lake. Like, I really don't like that book. It was kind of a good middle of the road Riley Sager book for me. Again, the setting was really great. A house on the cliff, like you're isolated, it's kind of dark and creepy. You're in a mansion where nothing has been updated. There's people that work there that you don't know. Did they have something to do with the murders or did they not? I don't know. But either way, it was a good time. With all of Riley Sager's books, I do end up really like enjoying the time I had reading them, so I will continue reading them. This one wasn't my favorite, but it wasn't my least favorite. I have my 3 favorite books of the month. I read 3 really good books that I just had a great time reading. First up being Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. I'm sure you've heard about this book and seen it literally everywhere. So I decided to read it because of that. I did a whole long video where I edited the mess out of that. So please watch it because I worked really hard on it. So I'm not going to talk too much about it here. If you want to see the review, please go watch it. Like I said, I worked on it a lot, but I had a fun time doing it. Fourth Wing is a new adult fantasy all about this character named Violet, who she lives in this world where it's kind of, she goes to this military college and it's broken up into different quadrants. Like you have the healers quadrant, the scribes quadrant, the infantry quadrant, and then the dragon riders quadrant. And she's always been kind of, grew up to be a scribe, like, you know, letters and history and all that stuff. And then her mom's like, no, you're going to be a dragon rider. And that's like the most deadly of them all. So they have to do a lot of different challenges to even get to be in the riders quadrant. And they, not only that, but you have to, you know, get a dragon, and the dragons are the boss. They choose their riders. They don't just choose anybody. You have to bond with the dragon. And so Violet does all that, and it's definitely like an underdog story. And she meets a guy and they hit each other at first because they both have really big vendettas against each other, and steam happens, and it was a fun time. Is this the most well-written fantasy book? No, not by a long shot. But did it make me feel like I was back in 2011 reading Divergent and the Hunger Games? Yes, it did. So it got me 4.5, dare I say 5 stars, because of the enjoyment factor. Like, I mean, dang, she had the steam, she had the dragons, she had the fun times of different obstacles and gauntlets these people had to go through. I was invested, and I'm still invested. I bought a physical copy. When will it get here? I don't know, but either way, I had a freaking good time reading it. We have The Wishing Game by Meg Schaefer. This is one I picked up on a whim on NetGalley, and I loved it so much I had to buy a physical copy. This is one that the cover drew me in, but then the plot was very interesting. So this is about a character named Lucy, and Lucy is a TA and like a kid, and Lucy is a TA in a kindergarten class, and she longs to be a mom. Not only that, but she longs to adopt this child that goes to her school. I forget his name, Christopher. His parents died a few years ago with a drug overdose, and she really wants to become his mom. She wants to foster to adopt him. Only she doesn't have a lot of money. The state really doesn't work well with you with that, and so she's like, I don't know if I will become his mom. But then she learns her favorite author of all time, think of kind of like R.L. Stein with like a long series list. His name, I forget his name, Jack Masterson. He decides that he is coming out of retirement, like he hasn't written a book in his famous series, the Clock Island series, in years. But now he's hosting a contest that one of his most popular, like one of his most beloved readers will win a copy of his brand new book. And not only that, Lucy is one of like the 5 selected that actually gets to go to the real Clock Island to participate to win this book. So Lucy's like, you know, I could win this and I could sell it and then I could become Christopher's mom. And it's just a beautiful book. I loved it so much. It very much is reminiscent of Willy Wonka. Like if you love the Royal Doll, I always say his name wrong, book, I forget, I think it's Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. You know, it's hard because of the movie. But if you love that series, if you love that book, the movie, the Gene Wilder one, you will love this book. It is just so much fun. It's about an author that really wants to connect with his readers again, to imagine that, to get that magic back. And you know, it's also about Lucy. She really desperately wants to become Christopher's mom. And it's just so freaking heartwarming. I loved it so much. 5 out of 5. Like, this is one that I don't think a lot of people will read. It's definitely under the radar, but I loved it. If you just want a fun, whimsical breath of fresh air, but also just really heartwarming, this is a great book for you. I mean, even in this book, I think at one point Lucy gets contacted by like this dark and mysterious guy that's like, I'll give you all this money if you sell me this book, which reminds me of that quintessential scene in Willy Wonka where the guy goes to each one of the contestants to do the same deal, which I was like, oh, this is so reminiscent. I loved it. It was great. Highly recommend it. Last favorite, because all these 3, then my last favorite, because these last 3 I'm talking about are truly my favorites of the month, is The Wall of Winnipeg Me by Mariana, Mariana Zapata. Hopefully I said that right. This was my first book by her, and I am hooked. Like, she's another indie romance book that She's another indie romance author that I cannot get enough of. I devoured this book. If you like slow burn romances, you need to read this book. So this book is all about a character. This is all about a character named Vanessa, who is an assistant to Aiden. And Aiden is a football player, pro football player. And they worked together for years and years. And Vanessa one day, she's like, you know what? I want to pursue my graphic design career. And, you know, I'm tired of being walked upon. And so she quits. She tells Aiden, like, you know, I'm done. I'm done with all of this. I'm done with you. And then days later, Aiden, you know, knocks on the door. He's like, hey, because he's from Canada. He's like, I'm about to get kicked out of this country unless I get married. Will you be my wife? And she's like, we've never even said more than like 5 sentences to each other. So it's all about their journey of like, first up, like boss and assistant, then kind of, you know, this whole fake marriage thing. And then they become friends slowly because of that, and then it kind of grows into more. And it is the slow burnest of all slow burn romances. Like, it takes a long time, but it felt so organic and so real that I was so invested in it. I loved this book. I want to read all of her books. Her books are slowly being sold to traditional publishers, but this one being the first one, hence why I was able to read on NetGalley. I, like, literally after I finished this, I went to go buy All Roads Lead Here, but what do you know, it was also bought by a publisher, which means I cannot buy an ebook of it, a physical book of it. Either way, I want to read all of her books because this was 5 out of 5. Amazing. Loved it. So there you have all of these 7 books I read in the month of June. Like I said, not a ton of quantity, but quality was there, so I cannot complain about that. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video.